Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Brown Overboard. I'm your host, Josh Bam Bam Brown. First off, I wanted to give y'all guys a bit of an update about the injury that I sustained a few days ago. I was talking about it on the last episode of the podcast, and what happened was I nearly cut off the tip of my finger with a hedger. I was reaching into the back of my truck. I was trying to get the hedger out of the back. Like an idiot, I was holding on to the handle and not over the trigger, but onto the handle. And while I reached in with my left hand to remove something that the blade was caught on, I was leaning over the tailgate and I kind of slipped forwards and my hand went over the guard and the trigger guard, the safety and the trigger, which turned the blade on for a second, and the two blades sit on top of each other like this, and it snagged my glove is what happened, and it pulled my finger into the hedger, and it nearly cut off the tip of my finger. I got 6 or 7 stitches, and it nicked the bone. So I wanted to give you all guys an update that I went in and I got a follow-up with the orthopedic surgeon. And he said everything was good, that it looked good, there weren't any bone shard fragments that they could find or anything like that. He didn't think there was any need to do anything to it, said that it was healing really fast. Said that there's most likely going to be some nerve damage just because of the amount of nerve endings that are in the tips of your fingers, but that there are a lot of nerves there, so I'll probably be good. I am healing quickly, and the prognosis is looking as good as can be. So I will continue to take the antibiotics and hopefully heal up really soon because I have too many things to do to be injured. I'm also glad that I was able to bandage it up with a smaller bandage because at first it was braced where I wasn't really supposed to move the finger, but it turns out where it's actually good if I get the finger moving a little bit because of where it's damaged and how it's damaged. So I can actually move my hand again. I can relax my hand. And the bandage is much smaller, so that is going to bother me a lot less. Enough of that. On with the show. Now, it is the spooky season. It is the spooky time of year. So I thought we would embrace that a little bit with tonight's episode of Brown Overboard and talk about some spooky things. Now, I'm always getting asked if I've ever seen Bigfoot or if I've seen UFOs or any kind of strange encounters we've had in the bush of Alaska, since we lived so much of our life in the middle of nowhere and have spent so much time in the forest, in the bush, in the wilderness, and been on the ocean for so long and all these things. People are constantly asking me about that kind of stuff. And I would venture to guess that anyone listening to the sound of my voice right now has seen a UFO, because all UFO means is unidentified flying object. So if you've ever seen anything in the sky that you couldn't readily identify, then you have seen a UFO. So have I seen UFOs? Definitely. Who hasn't? I have definitely seen things that, I couldn't necessarily say that's definitely a satellite, that's definitely a shooting star, that's definitely swamp gas reflecting off of Venus. I have, seen some unexplained occurrences in the sky. Who hasn't? There's always that unexplained element when it comes to the heavens. As far as Bigfoot or anything like that, no. I have never seen a Sasquatch. I've never had a Sasquatch walk out and wave at me, so I've never seen Bigfoot, never seen a Sasquatch. And I have spent a great deal of time in the forest alone, with my dad, with my family. I have been all over the wilderness in a lot of different instances, spent a lot of time out there. And no, I have never seen anything. I've heard some noises that I couldn't necessarily discern. I couldn't say exactly what they were. We've definitely heard some stuff at night that we couldn't say for sure we knew what it was. There have definitely been some odd instances in the forest, but never something that I could outright say, yes, I saw a Bigfoot. So have there been odd things? Of course there have, but who knows? Who knows what that was or what that could have possibly been. Do I think it's possible that there could be stuff like that out there? Of course. Right? Because you think to yourself, well, everything's been explored, quotations. And to a degree, yes, that's true. But there's also a whole lot of nothing out there. There is a lot of area that people don't go. it's not like there's someone walking every square foot of the earth at all times, right? So if you've seen as much immense nothingness as I have in my life, and just how big the forest out there really is, could there be something that we haven't discovered yet? Yes, there definitely could be. And if there was something of that great of intelligence that doesn't want to be found and knows to stay away from areas where there are people, then yes, there definitely could be. Because, how often do you see the wolves out there when they don't want to be seen? And that's a wolf. Animals are way, way, way more intelligent than people give them credit for, and way sneakier, and can definitely avoid humans when they want to. So I would definitely say it's possible. Can I say that I've ever seen anything? No. But I would say it's not impossible. Definitely not, because there's a whole lot of nothing out there. There's a lot of area that just nobody ever goes in. There's a lot of area that is just not traversed, and not readily traversed. I've definitely personally been in a lot of places that I would say very few people have ever walked. That very few people have ever been. Because we have been all over a lot of places that it was very much the lost world. And if you get the chance to go out somewhere like that, be careful, but definitely check it out, because it's very cool to go to those places. Just take it seriously, and who knows what you might see. Now, as far as spooky instances or events, there was this one time when it was close to the end of the Gypsy Girl era. So I was probably 9. I was about 9 years old. And there was this bay that, we traveled all over Southeast Alaska when we were living on Gypsy. And we were staying in this one area where there was this bay that we used to go to get water. Because when you're on a boat, you have water on tanks and you have water jugs. So a lot of people, they just fill up their water when you go to a harbor and you just fill your tanks. And that's doable, and we've definitely done that. But the majority of time, we would go to shore. We would find somewhere to collect our water, somewhere that had a beautiful, crisp, wonderful, clear Alaskan stream or river. And we would collect as many jugs as we could fill, and we would take that back to the boat, and we would dump those jugs into the boat's water container, the tanks on the boat. And then we would go back and refill them. And it would usually take several trips to do this, because like Gypsy could hold a lot of water. And we would make multiple trips back and forth to the boat. And then we would fill up the jugs and bring those as well. So we also had the water jugs. Now, there was this one bay that we used to go in to collect water. And this little bay, it was beautiful. It was a gorgeous little bay. We could anchor pretty close to it, and then we just take the skiff in. And there was a little cabin, actually. There was a cabin and a shed connected to it. And what it was, there was this old couple that used to live out there, way in the middle of nowhere, right? And they built this house. The husband and wife, they built this house, this little cabin and adjacent like shed thing that was connected to it. And they lived there for a very, very long time. And they fished, they did fishing and whatnot, and lived off the land. And the story goes, the legend goes, that they actually both passed away in that cabin. And it sat there after that. And nobody, people would anchor in the bay sometimes. People like us would come and collect water because it was a beautiful, nice stream that was very easy to get to because of the clearing that they had cut out when they built the cabin. And the water flowed very close to where the cabin was built. Within sight of where the cabin was. The cabin was kind of like down the beach a pretty good ways from where the water was. But it was all cleared out, and it was super nice, and it was really cool. We would go there and collect water and mess around all the time, really, when we were in that area. So one day we're there and we're getting water. And of course, we were all told not to go wandering around. We were told specifically never to go into the cabin. We were told stay away from the cabin. Don't go in there. And all the times that we had ever been to that bay to collect water or to beachcomb or to explore, we had never gone over to the cabin. we had never messed with it. Everybody, honored the fact that that was theirs, and that was, even though they were long gone, like just nobody messed with it. Everybody left it alone. And so we were forbidden from going to that cabin. So of course that made me want to go to the cabin. So this one day, it's a beautiful, beautiful sunny day. This one day, we are there. We're getting water. We're doing our thing. I think we had already made a couple trips of water to the boat, and Dad was doing what he did, and Mom was watching us. And I remember they both said, it was cool if we play on the beach and we can play around, and Mom was watching everybody. And I was playing on the beach, and I kind of got away from everybody else, and I would just go a little bit further and then look back and wait to get called back. And I would go a little bit further and wait and wait to get called back, and then a little bit further and wait to get called back. And I kind of did this until I was pretty close to where the cabin was. And I remember I thought to myself that at any moment I was going to get caught. At any moment they were just going to yell, "Get over here. What are you doing?" And they didn't, though. Like, thinking back, obviously this is not a good idea. Don't do this, kids. But I just kept getting closer and closer to the cabin until eventually I was right up on it. And at that point, I was like, well, I just have to see inside. Like, curiosity and the adventure of it, the thrill of checking it out had gotten to me, and I had to see inside. So I climbed in to the cabin. The door, when I went, it was super spooky, right? It was pretty spooky. It was all old and decrepit and run down, but it was pretty well built though, so it was like still a stout house. And once I got closer, I realized it was built more like a house, not a cabin. It wasn't like a one-room cabin. They had built like a nice place, a nice little house, and the door wouldn't open. I don't know if it was blocked or just locked or what, but I couldn't get the door didn't want to open, and one of the windows was busted out, and so I just climbed in through the broken window. And I'm looking all around at everything, and it's old and it's dusty and it has that smell to it. And I swear, as soon as I got inside the house, and it was a bright, beautiful day outside, right? And I swear, as soon as I got inside the house, it was like clouds rolled in outside, and it got dark, and like immediately everything was darker, and you could almost hear the eerie music, and everywhere I stepped it was creaking, and you could hear the nails as you stepped on the wood walking through the floor. And I checked it out for a good little while, looking at a table that was in there and the chairs and things that were sort of knocked over. And I remember there were like some old candles and photos and stuff on a desk, because there was one photo, just like one of those movies. There was one photo I remember vaguely of like an older couple out front of the cabin, but the cabin wasn't as big as it was now, so it was like a really old picture, I guess. And the guy was wearing like the overall Helly Hansen's, the rain gear, and holding something. He was holding like a tool or a saw or something like that in the photo. So anyway, I'm looking around, and there was this one area where there was like a tool bench or something, and I saw something that was cool, and I wanted to check it out. And so like I reached across. I remember reaching across like to this tool that was on the wall or something. And all of a sudden, the floorboards gave way. They broke, and I fell through. I fell through the ground, through the floor. And the house was built up to where there was a underneath. It wasn't necessarily really a basement, but it was built to where they had it was like a 2-story, but the first story was really the house, and the bottom story was just like storage and stuff, I guess. I fell through, and at that age, at that time, it felt like it was a good ways that I went, and hit rather hard, but I landed on all these nets, all these old fishing nets, which is both a good and a bad thing, because it did break my fall, but also all of a sudden I'm now tangled up in all these fishing nets, like immediately. And I've never been a panicker. I don't panic. I have never been someone that panics. Even when I was a little baby, even when I was a little kid, mom and dad always said that I was never someone that panicked. I would never get in a situation where something was going wrong and be someone that lost it, that couldn't keep it together. I was always pretty calm under pressure. And so there was a little bit of that like freak out moment because of what just happened. I'm a kid. I just fell through I'm in somewhere I'm not supposed to be. I just fell through the floor. I fell a good ways, hit pretty hard. And when I immediately knew I was tangled up, because as I kind of turned, the way that you do, you land on your back like that hard, you kind of turn over and then you go to stand up. And as I did, I had wrapped my legs like in the net. And then I realized that, and then my arm kind of caught in the net. And I remember stopping and I just took a breath. I was like, okay, you're okay. And then I sat down and propped my knees up, and I got out my Swiss Army knife, my old faithful Swiss Army knife that my dad had given me, that I carried everywhere. I carried for a very long time. I've always loved a good Swiss Army knife. They're very dependable, very well made. And I relied on that knife a lot. I remember I got out the old Swiss Army knife, which was also a Swiss Army knife that my dad had carried for a very long time, and so it was very special to me. And so I took that out, and I started cutting all these ropes and net and everything off of me, because it was ropes, it was net, it was a bunch of stuff piled up on itself, and there was some buoys and things, the little white buoys that you run across like nets, and the fishing net buoys. And so I threw those aside, and I'm cutting the net off of my leg and everything. And I hear something above me. I hear creaking. And I stop cutting for a second. And I pause. I don't hear anything. And so then I continue to cut, and I'm pulling the nuts off. I'm just about free, because it was going through them pretty good. And I heard the creaking again. And this time, though, I heard footsteps. And so I just assumed that it was my dad. I assumed that they had noticed I was gone and had assumed that I went to the cabin, or maybe they had seen me walk in that way or something like that. And I figured it was my dad, because I at that point heard footsteps, and I looked up, and also where I was under the house there in that storage area was pitch black. It was pitch black. It was completely dark. So I was like feeling around for cutting like the net off and everything. And my eyes had sort of adjusted a little bit to where I could see what I was doing. And there was light shining in from above, but like everywhere I looked, like I could not see anything around the room. There could have been anything like a couple feet away from me, and I would have had no idea because it was pitch black. So I hear the footsteps, and I look up to where I fell through the floor, and I hadn't looked up I looked up when I first turned over, but then I was really focused, very tunnel vision on getting the nets off my leg. And I looked up, and I saw, I kid you not, 100%, not making this up, wasn't seeing things. I saw what looked like a person, all silhouetted, because also, like I said, it was very dark. It was dark inside the cabin, and there was just the ambient light coming through the windows. So the person was very, very shadowed, so I couldn't like see who they were. Like I said, I assumed it was my dad, but I saw a person, what looked like a person, stand over the hole and look over the hole down at me, and then just back up and was gone. So at that point, I started freaking out a little bit. At that point, I was like, okay, what's going on? Because I did call out when I first saw the shadowed figure. I was like, Dad, I'm down here, Dad. And that's when they looked down the hole, and then they just backed up and were gone. So I was like, okay, is Dad messing with me? What's going on? Because I wouldn't put it past my dad to mess with me at that point, because I was doing something I was specifically told not to do, something I should not have been doing. So I wouldn't have put it past my dad, though I was sitting there thinking to myself that I didn't think he would mess with me in that instance, because he wouldn't know if I was hurt when I fell. He would also be a little bit upset that I was doing something I shouldn't have done, and that I was over there and messing with the house and all that. So at this point, I'm ready I'm done. I'm ready to go home. I'm through exploring. The adventure is not as fun at this moment. So I finally got myself cut free and was able to, I'm assuming there was like a ladder or something around there, or stairs or something to get out. But I didn't want to go feeling and traipsing around the dark trying to find it. I didn't have any light on me. I had I had like a fire starter, but I didn't have like matches or a lighter or flashlight or anything like that. So I didn't want to feel around the dark, to try and find the stairs out or a ladder out. Also, I figured that, because I wasn't a stupid kid, so I figured that, maybe a little bit, but I wasn't that stupid. And I figured that if I'm on fish nets and stuff, there's probably fish hooks and things around here, right? So there's probably like fish hooks hanging on the wall. They could be on the floor. Who knows, right? So I didn't want to go getting stuck with anything or anything like that. So I just climbed up the wall, through the same hole that I fell through. And it wasn't incredibly hard to climb, because there were bits of things. Like I remember there were bits of things like sticking out. And for the first part, I was able to like climb on something that was on the wall. I remember there being like ropes or something that I kind of climbed up. And then I got to a point where I was just able to like, just parkour my way up to the top. I've always been pretty agile, and at that time I was definitely really agile. So I just climbed up the wall and back out where I had fallen in. And then I looked around, and there was nobody there. There was absolutely no one there. I didn't see anyone else. Dad was not anywhere around. And I remember when I got up towards the hole, that feeling that you have, like you're just about to get grabbed by something, and I climbing out of the hole and kind of did a little bit of a roll. And then I stopped while still hunkered down and looked around. And I remember going, Dad? And I kind of looked around, but I didn't like yell out, because at this point now I was like, well, if Dad's not in here, I don't really want to call everybody's attention. I want to just get out and get going. And also I remember when I was climbing up, my leg caught on something and it cut me. There was like a nail or something sticking out of the wall. And I remember that hitting my leg just above the knee on the left leg. And it cut me and cut through my jeans. Now, I was pretty sure, and I later asked my mom, I've had a tetanus shot, right? Because, again, I wasn't a stupid kid. And she was like, yes, you have. Why? And I was like, no reason, just curious. And because at the time when it happened, I immediately thought, because that's something we had been heavily taught, like first aid and stuff like that, because you have to be aware of all those things when you're out there, no matter how old you are. So we knew all those things, and Dad always trained us with like CPR and that stuff. So I knew as soon as I got cut that I'm like, I think I've had a tetanus shot, but I'm gonna have to find out, because that's not something you want to hide. Right? You don't want to hide that you got bit by the zombie. You want to find out and make sure you've had the cure to the virus. So anyway, I got up to the top of the floor there, looked around, called out just the one time for Dad. There was no one there. And I made my way back to the same window that I had crawled in, and I crawled out onto the porch. And I didn't even turn around or look back at the house until I was about halfway across the beach back to where my mom was. And my dad he had still been making trips of water back to Gypsy. So Mom and the kids had been playing on the beach while Dad was making the runs. And Mom, at that point, I don't know if maybe they did like notice what I had done and just didn't ever say anything, or if they just never knew, because I never told this story really to anyone ever. I've never really told this story. I have in recent times told it a few times, and like I'm telling y'all guys now, so it's out there. But I was always pretty sure that my dad knew what had happened. And as far as like Mom like noticing my jeans were ripped or something like that, like we were pretty rough and tumble. I was always tearing my clothes. I would just tear my clothes up until they were just like falling off of me. So that's not something that was going to draw a lot of attention. And Mom definitely was very, very good at keeping an eye on all of us, but there were instances of her relying on us to not do something stupid. And that was just one of those instances of me doing something that I shouldn't have been doing, something that I was doing something stupid. And I can't remember if Mom and Dad were doing something together while everybody played on the beach, and that's why she was distracted. Because usually if Dad wasn't there, she kept a much sharper eye on us. So I think that might have been what happened. Maybe everybody was messing around and Dad had already gotten through hauling the water, and Mom and Dad were like messing around or beach combing or doing something like that. I think that might have been what was happening and why they didn't notice what I was doing. Because again, this was a lifetime ago. So this was a long time ago, and I more vividly remember my experience and the adventure and less what everybody else was doing. But I clearly remember when I was walking down the beach to get to the cabin, because I remember that feeling of I'm getting away with this, and just thinking any minute I was going to get called back to everybody else and hear Mom's voice calling me. But I did actually make it to the cabin. And I clearly remember to this day what it smelled like in there. And I remember the fall through the floor and hitting what it felt like when I hit on my back. And it was quite the little adventure that I went on that day. And I never went back to that cabin. We went to that bay multiple times after that when we were in the area, and I would look sometimes at the cabin and just stare at it and be like, I really wonder what happened and what is going on with that cabin. But I never went back, and nobody else in the family ever went over there. Nobody ever messed with it as far as I know, and I never did again. So that's one of the spooky adventures that I've had, one of the occurrences like that. And I'm sure everyone has a story that is like that. Like everyone has like a haunted house story or some form of ghost story or spooky story, those kinds of things. And that's definitely not my only one, but that is one that really sticks out. And it was one of my adventures during the time of Gypsy Girl. And had a lot of adventures. In those years that we were on that boat, had a lot of fun, had a lot of adventures, and it was a blast. Everything about that time in my life was awesome and super cool, and I remember so much of it so vividly. For as young as I was, like there's a lot of stuff in my life that difficult to recall. Like some of it just, you know how it is, some of it just starts blending together. Some of the things are difficult to discern, but there was just something so magical about that time in my life that I can very vividly, very clearly recall so much of that time in my life, even with how young I was. And I count myself very fortunate, very lucky, very blessed to have had that opportunity, to have had that time in my life. And it definitely instilled something in me about boats and the ocean and being a sailor and living that kind of lifestyle. And I will say again, I've said it many times, I will continue to say it. I did not want to move off that boat. I didn't want to leave that lifestyle when we moved up to Haines. I loved it. I loved Gypsy. I loved everything about that world. And so that is one of my stories within the realm of the unexplained. All right, guys. So I guess I've been talking for a little while now, and I will call it an episode. So thank you very much, guys, for joining me for this episode of Brown Overboard. I appreciate y'all guys tuning in. I hope that y'all are enjoying listening to and watching the podcast as much as I'm enjoying hosting and producing. This is a lot of fun. I'm really enjoying getting to do the podcast and hosting and producing the podcast. And I'm going to have more episodes with different family members coming up soon. I think the next episode I'm going to have for y'all guys, I'm sitting back down with Gaby again, because Gaby is rearing and ready to go, chomping at the bit. He is jumping for joy, waiting to get back on the podcast. He's just been super busy. He's been working really hard, and he's got a lot of stuff going on with the new baby, with little Buck and all his little ones. So he hasn't had time here lately, but he's making some time. This weekend we're going to get together and we're going to film a few episodes because he is really looking forward to it. And he just really enjoys being part of the podcast. And I love having him on the podcast. I love talking to Gaby, and he and I can talk forever, all day long, all night long. And it's fun to take y'all guys along with us on those adventures where Gaby and I just sit down and talk about anything, everything, and nothing all at the same time. So stay tuned for that. I'm going to get going. Y'all guys have a good one. Stay safe. Join us next time for another episode of Brown Overboard. And always respect the danger.